Technology downtime can be a killer for your company. All this and more on this episode of Cyber Sentinel. Hello, I'm Alan Adcock, CEO of ASC Group here in Atlanta, Georgia, and this is Cyber Sentinel, where we talk about your security issues. So let's get to the first question.
Are there any tools that I can use to calculate the cost of downtime for my organization?
So there's a lot of different methods that have been used to calculate downtime for different organizations, and you have to pick the one that works best for your organization. Some organizations are primarily office workers, so you have different calculations we use for those versus, say, a manufacturing plant, which is going to be a very different calculation. So from a very basic standpoint, if you just want to get a ballpark, one method is for just a revenue calculation. If you take your annual revenue, divide it by 2,080, you'll get roughly what your revenue per hour is for that organization. So as just a very rough starting point, that's what you can look at from a downtime calculation. What's that going to cost you if you're down for 8 hours, 16 hours, a couple of days? What's that look like? So that's going to be a very rough calculation. Another way to do it is based on salary. Oftentimes, office type environments will look at their cost of having their staff there. So if that staff can't work, that becomes part of that calculation. So you take your payroll and divide that by that 2,080 calculation number. They're both obviously very rough estimates of what that downtime is going to cost your organization. And obviously there's some times that are more critical than others. And as we all know, some kind of a downtime is never going to happen at your lowest point in the year, your least busy point. It's always going to be at the worst time. I encourage you to go look at a tool that's available for free online from one of our partners called Datto. It is a web-based form where you input all kinds of different metrics for your organization. The metrics range from the size of the organization, all those kind of financial figures, as well as how you back up the data currently. What kind of data windows you have. We'll look at the restore times, and it's going to help us to calculate in a much more rigorous way what downtime is actually going to cost your organization. So we'll put a link to that tool here. Again, it's a free tool. You can put your information there and play with that tool to figure out what that downtime really is going to look like for your organization.
What factors do I need to consider in calculating costs of a cyber breach?
The costs that an organization needs to consider in the days after a cyber breach are many. So, the first costs are hard costs. System recovery costs. IT staff people are going to have to come in and clean all of the servers and workstations, laptops in that organization to make sure that whatever that attack has been removed from the system. Once those systems are clean, then you're going to have to do data recovery. So we're going to have to restore all the data from your backups or recreate data that wasn't able to be restored. This is a long and time-consuming and therefore costly process. While these two things are going on, you're going to have downtime. So your system, what's the system downtime costs for your organization? Different states have different breach notification laws. So you may have costs associated with notifying all of your clients or customers that their data has been breached. So again, if you don't have a highly managed system where we have good telemetry data on data passing in and out of the network, then you're going to have to do those breach notifications. There's costs associated with that. Once you've notified all those clients or customers, obviously there's a loss of reputation, which is going to impact future sales potentially. And then depending upon what industry you're in, you're also going to be looking at regulatory fines handed out by different government agencies. So this is big in medical through HIPAA laws, the HITECH Act, where those kind of things are going to come into play. So there's a lot to consider in those costs after a breach beyond just how do we get the network fixed and the data recovered.
What are some ways for my company to limit downtime?
When we look at downtime, we want to plan for that in every organization, so that there's a lot of ways that downtime can occur. So we want to definitely have a plan for when it does, so that we're not caught off guard. Every organization of any size needs to have some plans around downtime. The first thing we can do to limit downtime is try to avoid those factors that can contribute to downtime in the beginning. So we want to look at how much redundancy is on the computer network. A lot of organizations can't afford to have fully redundant infrastructure, but there are certain areas where we can affordably put in redundancy. If the internet is critical to your organization and it's growing in criticality for most organizations through the deployment of cloud applications, we would look at having multiple internet connections. So there's technologies. The new technology around that is called SD-WAN, which stands for Software-Defined Wide Area Networking, where we use equipment on the edge of the network to control which internet connection that traffic goes over for web-based applications that your staff uses for critical business functions. Other things we want to look at are there applications that run on the local area network that should be run in the cloud. So there's a big movement to the cloud for a lot of different applications. Some stuff we like to see on site, some stuff we put in the cloud. I think there's a mix for every organization. No organization is going to be fully cloud-based or fully on-premise at this point in time. How are your backups configured? So if we have a failure on a critical server, can we pull that server up in a virtual environment on site quickly? So we can take what would be a major downtime event where a server has gone offline and we have to order in parts and we have to wait to get that thing back up and running. That's going to be a major downtime event for most organizations of days, potentially a week, depending upon what's wrong with it. There's technologies now that we're deploying through business continuity that allow us to pull that server up in a matter of as little as 15 minutes on a standby piece of equipment as part of the backup solution. So we can spin that environment up. Your staff is working, maybe it's a little slower than it normally is, but you're accessing that data, it's all running, and then we're remediating whatever caused that downtime on the back end, but your staff is still functional during that time period. So, and those systems are really nice in that most of them now integrate off-site disaster recovery functionality that includes the ability to spin up those workloads in a cloud environment in the event that you have no office or are not able to go into that office space and work. So we would be able to stand up a scenario where workers could work from home in an emergency type situation. So there's a lot of things we can do nowadays on the technology side to limit the effect of downtime and the little amount of time that network is offline and your workers can't produce. But it's all part of that plan. So we got to have the planning in place at the beginning so we know what those remediation events are going to be. Well, that's all we have for today on this episode of Cyber Sentinel. If you have questions you want us to address on a future episode, reach out to us on social media at #CyberSentinel, and we'll do our best to get those questions answered in a future episode.